Michael Jordan is going to die in 30 seconds. The scream ripped through the air like a gunshot. 300 guests at the charity gala froze in the Grand Meridian Hotel's courtyard. Michael Jordan paused, his hand mere inches from the black Bentley's door handle. Lincoln Ford sprinted across the polished marble, his janitor's uniform drenched in sweat, eyes wild with desperation. "Sir, do not get into that car." "What the devil?" Marcus Thompson, head of security, intercepted Lincoln like a linebacker. "Hold this lunatic! He's having a breakdown," Sarah from reception shrieked, pointing an accusatory finger. "This man was cleaning the restrooms an hour ago, talking to himself." I heard them talking." Lincoln struggled against the hands that restrained him. "Two men in suits on the 10th floor. They said the car—" "Shut up." James, the cleaning supervisor, shoved Lincoln against the wall. "Are you drunk?" "High? You're going to be fired," the crowd murmured. Phones were raised. Jordan remained motionless, studying the man who trembled like a leaf. "Please," Lincoln cried out, his voice cracking. "They said you wouldn't see the sunset. Something about ensuring you never make it home." "Liar," James snarled. "This man has been problematic for weeks, always fabricating stories." "No, my son is dying." Tears streamed down Lincoln's face. "I need this job. Why would I lie?" His voice broke at the end, pure human desperation. Jordan stepped forward. "What exactly did you hear?" "Michael, don't listen to this," Thompson began. "What did you hear?" Jordan repeated, disregarding everyone else. "Two men—" Lincoln gasped, his gaze fixed on the Bentley as if it were a coiled snake ready to strike. "Gray hair, expensive suits." One said, "When Jordan gets into the car, the problem will be resolved." The other replied, "The device has been activated since 2 o'clock." A deadly silence descended upon the courtyard. "What device?" Jordan asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't know. I didn't stay to hear more," Lincoln cried. "But they laughed when they mentioned your name." "This is madness," Sarah shrieked. "He's making it all up." "Why would a janitor know something like this?" James scoffed. "You're paranoid, Jordan." Thompson pulled out his radio with a trembling hand. "I need a full sweep of the principal vehicle, now." "No," James protested. "You'll be giving this lunatic exactly what he wants. He's just seeking attention." "But what if he's right?" Jordan muttered, retreating another step from the car. Lincoln ceased struggling, his gaze locked with Jordan's across the hostile throng. "Sir, I have a 5-year-old son at home. Ryder. He's gravely ill. I couldn't stand by and let a child be orphaned just because I was afraid of appearing deranged." His words sliced through the pandemonium like a razor. "Call the police," Jordan finally uttered. "I want them to check the car. Now." "Michael, this is preposterous," Thompson protested. "Call the police," Jordan thundered. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Lincoln Ford slumped against the wall, trembling. Half the crowd regarded him as a hero, the other half as a dangerous lunatic. No one knew the truth, but the black Bentley remained there, sleek and silent, harboring its lethal secrets. The bomb squad arrived, clad like apocalyptic astronauts. Armored robots rolled towards the Bentley, mechanical manipulators quivering over every inch of the chassis. "Explosives check in progress." The robotic voice echoed over the intercom. "Maintain positions." 10 minutes crawled by like hours. 20. 30. Sweat streamed down Lincoln's face like briny rain. "Please, God," Lincoln murmured, his gaze riveted on the car that could detonate at any moment. "If I'm wrong, forgive me. If I'm right—" "Device located," the technician yelled. The multitude recoiled like a wave. Cell phones quivered in the hands of terrified onlookers. "Wait," the voice faltered. "Negative. False alarm. It's just a car air freshener." A deathly hush swept the courtyard. "What?" Morgan bellowed. "All clear, detective. Utterly clean. No explosives, no hazardous substances. Nothing but expensive leather and a scented pine tree." James erupted in hysterical laughter. "I told you so!" He pointed at Lincoln as if parading a battle prize. "Utterly deranged. He incited panic in 300 people for absolutely nothing." Lincoln Ford, Detective Lisa Morgan declared, her countenance grim as stone. You are under arrest for domestic terrorism, making a false alarm, and disturbing the peace. No! Lincoln struggled against the handcuffs, the metal biting deeper. I heard them! I swear I did! Of course you did! Morgan snapped. In your delusions! My son! Lincoln screamed, his voice ripping like shattered glass. He needs me! Ryder is 5 years old and he's dying. You should have considered that before your public outburst. The crowd dispersed, murmuring venomous disappointment. The spectacle was over, just another deranged black janitor causing trouble. But Jordan remained rooted like a statue, his laser-like eyes piercing Lincoln. Detective, Jordan called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. I want to speak with him. Mr. Jordan, this terrorist... 5 minutes. Jordan interjected with an authority that would melt steel. Alone. Morgan hesitated, then reluctantly retreated. Jordan approached Lincoln as if treading through a minefield. Why? Jordan whispered. Why did you destroy your life to save mine? Lincoln lifted his head, tears mingled with blood. Because I overheard 2 men plotting your death, sir. Gray hair, $3,000 suits. One said, when Jordan gets in the car, he'll never be our problem again. The other laughed and said, the accident will be clean and perfect. But there was nothing in the car. I know how this sounds, Lincoln erupted, but I have a dying child at home. Why would I fabricate this? Why would I destroy the only source of income I have? Jordan studied Lincoln's ravaged face for long seconds. Detective Morgan crossed his arms. A compelling story, but why didn't you come to the police immediately? Lincoln lowered his head, abashed. Because I'm just a black janitor with a criminal record, detective. Who would believe me? A criminal record? Jordan straightened. For what? Theft of medication, Lincoln whispered. 3 years ago. My son Ryder was suffering from terrible seizures, and I couldn't afford the medication. I tried to steal from a pharmacy. The silence in the room grew heavy as lead. That's why I knew if I told this story, they'd dismiss me as a crazy ex-con trying to draw attention. Lincoln continued. But when I saw you approaching the car, I couldn't remain silent. How old is your son? Jordan asked softly. 5 years old. Tears streamed down Lincoln's face. Ryder Ford. He was born perfect, but at 2 years old, the seizures began. The doctors say it's a degenerative neurological condition. Degenerative? He's losing motor skills. Each month he gets a little worse. He can't properly hold a pencil. He stumbles when he walks. Sometimes he can't form words. Jordan felt something constricting in his chest. How much does the treatment cost? $40,000 a year. I earn $18,000. And his mother? She died during childbirth, Lincoln choked out. Complications. It's just him and me against the world. Detective Morgan looked at Jordan, his expression a blend of skepticism and pity. Mr. Jordan, even if this story is true, this man caused public panic. Detective, Jordan interjected, rising abruptly. How much is his bail? Sir? The bail? How much will it cost for him to be released today? Morgan consulted his papers. Considering the charges, probably $50,000. Jordan pulled out his cell phone. Thompson, call my accountant. I want $50,000 in cash transferred to the court within the hour. Michael, Thompson protested. You barely know this man. I know enough, Jordan retorted, turning to Lincoln. You risked your job, your freedom, and potentially your life to save a complete stranger. Why? Lincoln wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his uniform. Because I know what it's like to lose someone you love, Mr. Jordan. I couldn't stand by and watch it happen to someone else. Jordan studied Lincoln's ravaged face for long moments. Lincoln Ford, he finally said, tomorrow at 10 in the morning, you will bring Ryder to the best neurologist in Chicago. All expenses are on me. The following morning brought a glimmer of hope Lincoln Ford had never dared to dream of. 24 hours prior, he had been merely a black janitor struggling to keep his job and afford the treatment for his dying son. Now he was seated beside Michael Jordan in a limousine en route to Chicago's premier medical center. Fate had intertwined their lives in a manner neither fully grasped yet, a connection that would alter everything irrevocably. "Daddy, why is that famous man coming with us?" Ryder Ford squeezed Lincoln's hand in the back seat of the limousine, his large eyes fixed on Michael Jordan, who sat ahead. The 5-year-old boy trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the spasms that had become increasingly frequent. "He's going to help us, son," Lincoln murmured, attempting to mask his own apprehension. Jordan turned, studying the child for the first time. Curly hair, caramel-colored skin, a shy smile despite his condition. But there was something in Ryder's eyes, a keen intelligence that seemed out of place in such a young child. "Hi, Ryder," Jordan said softly. "Do you like basketball?" "I can't play," Ryder replied with brutal candor. "My hands don't obey me anymore." The silence in the limousine grew heavy. Lincoln swallowed back tears. "Mr. Jordan," Lincoln whispered, "you didn't have to come in person. You've already done so much." "I want to be here," Jordan interjected. "Besides, I need to ensure Dr. Sullivan understands the urgency." "Dr. Sarah Sullivan?" Lincoln's eyes widened in astonishment. "The neurologist who appears on TV? She must cost—" "Don't concern yourself with that." The limousine pulled up to the Chicago Advanced Medical Center, a glass and steel edifice that resembled a temple of modern medicine. Valets rushed to open the doors. "Good heavens," Lincoln murmured, taking in the surroundings. "I don't belong here." "Today you do," Jordan stated firmly. But the moment they stepped into the marble lobby, Lincoln felt all eyes on them. Nurses whispered, security guards observed, patients pointed discreetly. "It's that janitor from TV," a blonde woman whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The one who caused all that panic." "Why is Michael Jordan with him?" another patient murmured. Ryder hid behind Lincoln's legs, sensing the hostility in the air. "Daddy, they don't like us," the boy whispered. "Ignore them," Jordan said loudly, striding towards the reception desk. "Michael Jordan for Dr. Sullivan. 10 o'clock appointment." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman in designer glasses, looked from Jordan to Lincoln with obvious confusion. "Mr. Jordan, is there some mistake?" she inquired delicately. "The appointment was scheduled for you, not for—" "For my guest and his son," Jordan cut in, his voice an icy tone. "Is there a problem with that?" "No, sir. It's just, well, this is a very exclusive medical center." "And I pay handsomely for exclusivity," Jordan snapped. "Now, where is Dr. Sullivan?" At that moment, an elegant family entered the lobby. A man in an Armani suit, a woman carrying a Hermes bag, and a boy of about 5 dressed like a little prince. James Wellington stopped abruptly upon seeing Lincoln. "My goodness," he murmured to his wife, Rebecca. "It's that man from television, the one who caused all that scandal at the hotel." Rebecca Wellington clutched her son Mason's hand tighter. "James, we don't want to associate with that sort of person," she whispered, but Lincoln heard clearly. "What sort of person?" Lincoln asked, his voice trembling with barely contained indignation. "Well, you know," James gestured vaguely. "People who cause disturbances." Jordan inserted himself between the families. "Mr. Wellington, I presume," Jordan said icily. "I recognize you from the financial papers. Owner of Wellington Industries." "Mr. Jordan," James immediately adopted an unctuous smile. "What an honor. I wasn't aware you frequented this medical center. I'm here with my friend Lincoln and his son." Jordan emphasized the word friend as if it were a declaration of war. As the adults conversed, something peculiar was transpiring. Ryder had emerged from behind Lincoln's legs and was gazing fixedly at Mason Wellington, and Mason was returning his gaze with equal intensity. "Daddy," Ryder tugged on Lincoln's sleeve, "why does that boy look like you?" Lincoln looked at Mason and felt the world spin. The lobby of the Chicago Advanced Medical Center had become a silent battlefield. Light filtered through the glass windows, casting geometric patterns on the polished Italian marble. Yet the tension in the air was dense enough to cut with a knife. Two families stared at each other across the opulent space, encircled by venomous whispers and curious glances from other affluent patients. Dr. Sarah Sullivan emerged from her private office, her graying hair pulled back into a severe bun that brooked no disrespect. Her immaculate lab coat, bearing the authority of 3 decades spent saving neurological lives. Her green eyes, sharp as scalpels, swept over the scene with clinical precision. "Mr. Jordan," she greeted in a controlled voice, then paused abruptly as she sensed the palpable tension that permeated the lobby like a toxic cloud. "What exactly is going on here?" "Doctor," Jordan said slowly, glancing alternately between the two extraordinarily similar children who were causing the commotion. "We have a situation that I would describe as extremely unusual." Lincoln remained paralyzed like a statue, his gaze flitting from Ryder to Mason and back to Ryder, as if he were watching a slow-motion horror film. "Daddy," Ryder tugged at Lincoln's uniform sleeve again, his large, bewildered eyes. "Why does that boy look so much like you? Is he my brother I didn't know about?" The innocent question echoed through the lobby like a gunshot. Conversations ceased. Nurses halted their steps. Even the security guards turned to observe. Rebecca Wellington gripped her husband's arm with enough force to leave marks, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the Italian wool of his suit. "James, this is utterly impossible," she whispered, yet loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mason was born in our home, with our private physician, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison." "No, Rebecca," James corrected, his brow furrowing as memories began to coalesce. "Have you forgotten? There were severe complications that night. You started bleeding uncontrollably. Dr. Morrison said she couldn't manage it alone. You were rushed to Chicago General." Lincoln felt his blood literally freeze in his veins, as if he had been injected with liquid ice. "Chicago General Hospital?" he whispered, his voice almost inaudible. "What date, precisely?" "March 15th, 2019. Rebecca answered automatically, then clapped her hands over her mouth in absolute horror as she realized what she had just divulged. "Oh my God, no! Jesus Christ!" Lincoln stumbled backward, crashing into an expensive coffee table. "Ryder was born at Chicago General, same date, the exact same date, at 12:31 a.m. The ensuing silence was so dense and heavy, it seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. Every person in the lobby was frozen, as if time had utterly ceased. Dr. Sullivan observed the two children with the acute clinical gaze of someone who had witnessed the impossible become possible in medicine. The resemblance between Lincoln and Mason was striking. "Mr. Ford, Mr. Wellington," she stated very slowly, weighing each word as if it were evidence in a courtroom. "I need to ask some urgent medical questions. Do you have the children's complete birth records?" "Of course we do," James retorted defensively, his voice rising an octave. "Mason is our legitimate biological son. We have all the documents, certificates, everything." "And Ryder is my son," Lincoln added, his voice trembling, pulling the boy tighter into his embrace. "I was there when he was born. I watched my wife die bringing him into the world." Dr. Sullivan scrutinized Lincoln's and Mason's faces for several long, tense moments, comparing each facial feature with the precision of a computer analyzing data. "I'm going to be completely direct with you," she stated finally, removing her glasses to nervously polish them. "In 30 years of practicing neurological medicine, I have examined thousands of individuals. Never, and I repeat, never have I seen two purportedly unrelated individuals with such detailed physical resemblance." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Jordan inquired, though he already knew he didn't want to hear the answer. "I'm saying this raises extremely concerning medical questions that demand immediate investigation." "What kind of questions?" James Wellington demanded, his voice escalating dangerously. Dr. Sullivan looked directly into the eyes of every adult present. "The kind that can only be answered through comprehensive genetic DNA testing." The lobby erupted into controlled chaos. Patients whispered furiously, nurses exchanged stunned glances. Security guards discreetly moved closer. "This is ridiculous!" Rebecca Wellington shrieked, her socialite composure utterly dissolved. "Are you suggesting that my son isn't my son?" "No one is suggesting anything yet," Dr. Sullivan retorted icily. "We are simply following incontrovertible medical evidence that any competent professional would readily acknowledge." Lincoln clutched Ryder as though the boy might evaporate if he loosened his grip. silent tears streaming down his face. "Doctor," he whispered, his voice fractured, "if this is true, if there's been some dreadful mistake, then two families have been deprived of their biological children for 5 full years." She finished with a chilling clinicality. "And two children have been raised by individuals who may not be their true genetic parents." The silence that followed was so pervasive that the faint hum of the building's ventilation systems became acutely audible. Dr. Sullivan's private examination room had transformed into an ad hoc tribunal, where two families awaited a verdict that could utterly shatter their lives. The walls were adorned with medical diplomas and certifications that now seemed like mute witnesses to an unfolding catastrophe. Lincoln sat rigidly in a leather chair, holding Ryder in his lap as if the boy were an anchor in a tempest. Across the room, James and Rebecca Wellington occupied identical chairs, Mason between them, all staring as if transfixed by a horror film. Jordan remained standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, observing the Chicago traffic 20 stories below as he processed the sheer magnitude of what might be transpiring. "Are you truly suggesting," Rebecca Wellington said, her voice oscillating wildly between absolute indignation and unadulterated terror, "that there was some kind of deliberate swap, an accident, criminal negligence?" "I am suggesting absolutely nothing," Dr. Sullivan responded with the glacial calm of one accustomed to delivering devastating news. "I am simply following unambiguous physical evidence that any trained physician would instantly recognize." She adjusted her spectacles and opened a voluminous file. "The physical resemblance between the man and the child is statistically impossible without direct biological kinship. I'm talking about probabilities in the billions to one." Lincoln leaned forward, clutching Ryder even tighter. "Dr. Sullivan," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "if this is true, should there genuinely have been a horrific medical error? Then two families were entirely deprived of the opportunity to know and raise their true biological children for a full 5 years," she concluded unceremoniously. "And two innocent children were raised by individuals who, genetically speaking, are complete strangers." James Wellington's face flushed crimson with rage, veins throbbing in his neck. "That is utterly preposterous," he bellowed, startling the children. "Mason is our son. Look at him. He has Rebecca's eyes." "In fact, he doesn't," Dr. Sullivan stated icily, consulting her notes. "I am looking at him now, and I discern significantly more specific physical resemblances to Mr. Ford than to either of you." "How dare you insinuate such a thing about our family?" Rebecca shrieked, completely losing her composure. "Because I am a physician with 3 decades of experience," Dr. Sullivan retorted, her voice as sharp as broken glass. "And I recognize unmistakable genetic patterns when they are plainly visible right in front of me." Jordan finally turned away from the window. "Doctor, how long would a comprehensive DNA test, including all requisite verifications, typically take?" "With absolute priority in laboratories operating around the clock, a maximum of 24 hours. "Then proceed," Jordan commanded with an authority that brooked no contradiction. "I require complete and definitive answers." "Michael," Lincoln whispered, his voice as fragile as shattered glass. "And what if we discover that Ryder isn't genuinely my biological son?" The question hung heavy in the room's tense atmosphere, like a nuclear bomb poised to detonate, laden with 5 years of paternal love, sacrifice, sleepless nights, and unwavering devotion. "Then we will contend with that reality when it materializes," Jordan replied resolutely. "But first we need to ascertain the absolute truth, no matter how excruciating it may prove." Dr. Sullivan collected saliva samples from both children and the adults present with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed this task thousands of times, yet never under such profoundly emotionally charged circumstances. Each sterile swab represented an entire life potentially on the brink of upheaval, 5 years of memories called into question, and futures shrouded in uncertainty. "The results will be available tomorrow precisely at 3 in the afternoon," she announced somberly. "I recommend you utilize these next 24 hours to emotionally prepare yourselves for any eventuality." The two families parted ways in the corridor, a silence fraught with tension hanging between them. 24 hours remained to discover if everything they knew about their own lives, identities, and families was an elaborate fabrication built upon a catastrophic medical error. Lincoln carried Ryder to the car, the boy finally succumbing to emotional exhaustion in the arms of the only father he had ever known. Yet Lincoln couldn't stop gazing at his son's face, wondering, "Are you truly mine?" The next day, Dr. Sullivan held the sealed envelope with hands that remained steady through sheer professional resolve. But Lincoln could discern the palpable tension in her green eyes. She had delivered devastating diagnoses before, but never anything with the potential to shatter two entire families simultaneously. The medical center's conference room had been chosen specifically for its size and neutrality, large enough to accommodate all involved adults, yet sterile enough to be devoid of emotional resonance. The two families sat on opposite sides of the long mahogany table, Jordan strategically positioned in the middle as a reluctant mediator. Marcus Thompson leaned against the wall near the door, not because it was necessary for security, but because Jordan had requested his moral support. Even a rich and powerful man needed backing at a juncture such as this. "Before I open this envelope," Dr. Sullivan stated with an almost reverential solemnity, "I need everyone to understand something crucial. Regardless of what these results reveal, these two children require emotional stability and unconditional love." "Just open the damn envelope," James Wellington growled through gritted teeth, clutching Mason so tightly that the boy squirmed uncomfortably. Dr. Sullivan broke the red seal and extracted the official documents. She read in complete silence for several moments that stretched into what felt like hours, her expression gradually shifting from professionally neutral to genuine shock, then to something akin to horror. "Oh, almighty God," she whispered, clapping her hands over her mouth. "What?" Lincoln shouted, leaping from his chair. "What in God's name do those papers say?" Dr. Sullivan drew a steadying breath, her hands trembling faintly as she arranged the papers, and read in a voice that struggled for composure. "Ryder Ford," she announced tremulously, "is 99.97% genetically compatible as the biological son of James Robert Wellington and Rebecca Marie Wellington." Rebecca sagged utterly into her seat, a paroxysm of hysterical sobs erupting from her lungs as though she had been physically assaulted. "And Mason Wellington," Dr. Sullivan pressed on relentlessly, "is 99.97% genetically compatible as the biological son of Lincoln James Ford." The shattering silence was rent by the sound of Lincoln collapsing quite literally to his knees on the cold floor, as if his legs had been shorn from beneath him. "No, no, no, no!" he cried out with soul-searing anguish. "Ryder is my son. I raised him. I love him. I changed his diapers, spent countless sleepless nights tending to his fevers. I taught him to walk. He is my son. Daddy?" Ryder darted instantly to Lincoln, bewildered and utterly terrified. "Why are you crying so hard? Did I do something wrong?" Lincoln clutched Ryder in an embrace of utter desperation, tears coursing in rivulets down his cheeks. "Because I love you more than my own life," he wept openly, "more than breathing, more than existing, irrespective of what any document states. You are my son, my baby, my entire life." Across the table, James Wellington was staring at Mason with a look of profound devastation, as though the preceding 5 years of his existence had been an elaborate fabrication. 5 full years, he uttered in a daze. 5 entire years raising, loving, emotionally investing in another man's son. "And I raised your son!" Lincoln roared through his sobs, still clutching Ryder. "What precisely are we to do with this revelation now? Do we simply exchange the children as if they were playing cards?" Rebecca Wellington had ceased her sobbing sufficiently to look directly at Ryder, the boy who, genetically, was indeed her true biological offspring. He has my eyes," she breathed in a blend of wonder and dread. "Oh my God, he genuinely possesses my very eyes." Jordan rose deliberately, feeling the crushing burden of an impossible responsibility settle upon his shoulders. "Now we find out exactly how this happened," he stated with unyielding resolve, "and we will ensure that such an egregious error never, ever befalls another family. But as the adults grappled with the legal and logistical ramifications, two innocent 5-year-olds simply gazed at each other across the table, utterly bewildered as to why all the adults in their lives were crying. The chief administrator's office at Chicago General Hospital was in a state of barely controlled pandemonium. Papers were strewn across the mahogany desk, files stacked like precarious towers, and Dr. Robert Kane, a 62-year-old man with a shock of white hair and weary eyes that had witnessed far too much in 3 decades of hospital administration, frantically thumbed through 2019 records. Jordan sat opposite him, his rigid posture emanating an authority that had intimidated adversaries on basketball courts and in boardrooms for decades. Lincoln remained in a side chair, holding Ryder on his lap, still in absolute denial about the DNA results. James Wellington stood by the window, Mason in his arms, his face set like granite, as he grappled with the reality that he had spent 5 years intensely loving a child who was not biologically his. Marcus Thompson flanked the doorway, not for security necessity, but because the situation necessitated an intimidating presence. Jordan's 2 lawyers sat silently, recording every word for prospective legal action. "Mr. Jordan," Dr. Kane said nervously, visible beads of sweat trickling down his forehead despite the air conditioning, "I can absolutely assure you this hospital upholds the highest standards of—" "Dr. Kane," Jordan interjected, his voice as frigid as steel, "2 newborn infants were swapped under the direct supervision of your institution. 2 entire families have been utterly shattered. 5 years of emotional bonds forged under entirely false pretenses. I do not want your empty assurances. I want specific, detailed answers." Dr. Kane swallowed hard and continued sifting through the files, his hands visibly trembling. "Here it is." He finally located the correct folder. "March 15th, 2019. 2 severe obstetric emergencies on the same shift that night." "Keep reading," Jordan commanded, his impatience palpable. "Rebecca Wellington arrived at 11:47 p.m. with severe placental abruption, a critical situation with imminent life-threatening risk to both mother and baby. The baby was delivered at 00:23 a.m. via emergency cesarean section." "And Lincoln's wife?" Lincoln took a deep breath, bracing himself to relive the most harrowing night of his life. "Sarah Elizabeth Ford, my wife, my soulmate," he uttered, his voice thick with emotion. "She died to bring Ryder into this world." "Sarah Ford arrived at 00:15 with severe obstetric complications," Dr. Kane read, his voice growing progressively fainter. "The baby was born at 00:31 after an exceptionally arduous labor. The mother passed away at 2:17 due to uncontrollable postpartum hemorrhage." Jordan mentally computed the timeline. Only 8 minutes separated the births. Same hospital corridor. "The exact same obstetric wing," Dr. Kane confirmed, sweat now openly cascading down his forehead. "Rooms 314 and 316, directly adjacent." "And where exactly were the infants taken immediately following their births?" "Both were transferred to the neonatal ICU due to—" Dr. Kane abruptly ceased reading, her face visibly blanching as if she had just seen a specter. "Due to what?" James Wellington demanded, his voice dangerously low. Dr. Kane closed her eyes as if willing reality to disappear. "Due to minor respiratory complications that necessitated specialized monitoring for a few hours." "And who was in charge of the neonatal ICU on that specific night?" There was a relatively new nurse overseeing, Jessica Elena Martinez. She had been employed for only 6 weeks prior. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. "What became of Jessica Martinez?" Jordan inquired, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Dr. Kane opened and closed his mouth several times, resembling a fish out of water. She was terminated exactly 3 weeks after an incident of gross professional negligence." "What specific type of negligence?" Lincoln pressed, though a part of him dreaded knowing the answer. Dr. Kane appeared physically unwell. "She swapped the identification bands of 2 different premature infants in our neonatal ICU. Both infants perished because they received entirely erroneous medical treatments based on their mistaken identities." The silence in the room was so absolute that the hum of the ventilation system and the distant traffic of Chicago 20 stories below were distinctly audible. "You knew," Lincoln enunciated very slowly, each word imbued with escalating fury. "You knew that Jessica Martinez had previously swapped infants and caused fatalities." "We weren't specifically aware of you two," Dr. Kane stammered desperately. "The error was only discovered and reported several weeks later when, after two innocent children died due to negligence." Lincoln exploded, springing to his feet so abruptly that Ryder nearly tumbled from his lap. "And you covered it all up, buried the records, and allowed this woman to continue working with newborns." James Wellington, who had remained silent, finally spoke in a low, deadly voice. "Where is Jessica Martinez now?" I honestly don't know," Dr. Kane admitted. "She completely vanished after her dismissal. She moved, left no forwarding address, and did not respond to attempts at contact." Jordan pulled out his cell phone. "Marcus, I need the best private investigators money can buy. Right now, I want Jessica Martinez found wherever she's hiding, and I want to know how many other babies she swapped during her career." He hung up and looked directly into Dr. Kane's eyes. "Doctor, I sincerely hope you have excellent liability insurance, because you're going to need it." Days later, the Cook County Family Court was strung tight as a piano wire about to snap. The room was packed not only with the involved parties, but with reporters, other attorneys observing out of professional curiosity, and social workers attempting to assess a situation unprecedented in Chicago's legal history. Judge Patricia Hayes, a 53-year-old African-American woman with a national reputation for unyielding toughness combined with compassionate justice, presided over the most emotionally complex case of her 25 years on the bench. She had read and reread all the documents twice, consulted international legal precedents, and still felt utterly unprepared for the magnitude of the decision she needed to render. "Ladies and gentlemen," she stated solemnly, her voice echoing through the silent chamber, "this court has never dealt with a situation remotely similar to this in the entire legal history of Illinois." Lincoln and James Wellington sat on opposite sides of the courtroom with their respective legal teams, each accompanied by a child who biologically belonged to the other man. The irony and tragedy of the situation were not lost on anyone present. Ryder was sitting next to Lincoln, drawing in a notebook to distract himself from the palpable tension of the adults. Mason remained close to James Wellington, occasionally glancing curiously at Lincoln. The man he now knew was his real biological father. "Your Honor," Thomas Bradford, Jordan's lead counsel, rose authoritatively. "My client, though not a direct legal party to this case, would like to offer a constructive proposal for resolution. Mr. Jordan possesses no legal parental rights over any of these children." The Wellington family's attorney immediately protested. "He ought not even be present for these proceedings. But I am the person who has fully financed all medical, legal, and investigative support for both of these families." Jordan calmly responded, rising from his chair. "And I have a practical proposition that prioritizes the children's welfare over legal complexities." Judge Hayes nodded for him to continue, curious despite herself. "Your Honor, these two innocent children need absolute emotional stability above all else. Ryder requires ongoing neurological treatment that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mason needs a father who will love him unconditionally, regardless of genetics." "What exactly do you propose, Mr. Jordan?" "Permanent joint legal custody, a formal, court-supervised co-parenting arrangement. No one loses a child they love, but both families gain an extended family." "That's utterly impractical," James Wellington exploded, rising abruptly. "I will not share parental rights over my—" He stopped abruptly, realizing that Mason was not technically his child at all. "Share rights over what precisely?" Lincoln asked softly, but with an edge of steel in his voice. "Because Mason is my actual biological son, and Ryder is your actual biological son. But we both have loved them as if they were ours for 5 full years." The two children were sitting between the warring adults, confused and clearly frightened by the emotional intensity surrounding them. "Your Honor," Rebecca Wellington spoke for the first time throughout the entire hearing, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. I, I love Mason more than my own life. Even knowing now that he doesn't carry my DNA, I love him as if he were born from my own body. And I love Ryder more than breathing, Lincoln added, his voice thick with emotion. Biology does not negate 5 full years of dedicated parenthood, sleepless nights, and unconditional love. Judge Hayes carefully studied the two families for several long and silent minutes, weighing not only the legal aspects but also the emotional well-being of two innocent children whose lives had been completely upended. This court orders a complete and comprehensive psychological evaluation of all adult parties involved, she finally announced. Temporary shared custody will be implemented immediately until a final decision is reached. What does that mean specifically in practice? Lincoln asked, concerned. It means you have exactly 6 months to prove to this court that you can prioritize these children's well-being above your own emotional needs and learn to function as a non-traditional yet stable family. She struck the gavel once. Because I absolutely refuse to separate children from parents who genuinely love them, even if genetics dictate otherwise. But you need to show me that this can work practically. The following day at 3:15 in the morning, Lincoln's phone rang with the urgency of a fire alarm cutting through the silence of his small apartment. He woke instantly, his heart already racing with the instinctive panic every parent knows when the phone rings in the middle of the night. Mr. Ford, the nurse's voice from Chicago Children's Hospital was urgent yet controlled. You need to come to the hospital immediately. Ryder is experiencing severe and prolonged seizures. His condition is rapidly deteriorating. Lincoln dressed with unprecedented speed, his hands trembling as he fumbled for his car keys. But upon reaching the hospital parking lot, he was taken aback to find a familiar black Bentley already parked in the emergency area. Jordan was pacing back and forth in the pediatric ICU waiting room, still clad in expensive sleepwear beneath a wool coat. How did you know? Lincoln asked, perplexed. The hospital called me too, Jordan promptly clarified. I am formally designated as the financial guarantor for all his medical treatments. I arrived 20 minutes ago. They rushed together through the sterile corridors to the pediatric ICU, where they found Ryder hooked up to a multitude of monitors and machines, his small body convulsing uncontrollably with seizures that appeared to be tearing his nervous system apart. Dr. Sullivan stood beside the bed, directing a cadre of specialists like a general on a battlefield. What in God's name is happening to my son? Lincoln cried out, attempting to approach the bed, but being gently restrained by a nurse. The extreme emotional stress of the past few weeks has dramatically exacerbated his pre-existing neurological condition, Dr. Sullivan quickly explained, without taking her eyes off the monitors. The seizures are lasting longer and are more intense than anything we've witnessed previously. But he was improving, Lincoln despairingly protested. Children are more susceptible to emotional trauma than adults often grasp, she responded. The uncertainty surrounding his identity, family, future, all of it has created an overload on an already compromised nervous system. Jordan approached the bedside where Ryder was battling the seizures. Doctor, what are our treatment options? Dr. Sullivan paused, looking directly into the eyes of both men. We must make an immediate decision regarding experimental gene therapy. It is our only genuine hope. What kind of therapy? What are the risks? Lincoln pressed. Advanced gene therapy utilizing modified viruses to repair the neurological damage. It costs $350,000. There's approximately a 60% chance of complete success. Lincoln felt his knees buckle. And what if we don't proceed with the treatment? Without immediate intervention, based on the deterioration we're observing tonight, Ryder has at most 4 to 6 months to live. The words hit Lincoln like physical blows. He slumped into a nearby chair, burying his face in his hands. $350,000, he muttered. I don't even have $350 in my bank account. I do, Jordan stated immediately, without a hint of hesitation. Administer the treatment now. Michael, you can't simply... I can and I will, Jordan interjected with absolute resolve. You, a stranger, risked everything to save my life from a conspiracy I didn't even know existed. Now it is unequivocally my turn to save his. At that precise moment, the automatic ICU doors slid open, and James and Rebecca Wellington burst in, still in their sleepwear, their faces etched with panic and genuine concern. "How is he?" Rebecca immediately pressed, tears already streaming down her face. "We received a call that Ryder was—" "You came," Lincoln murmured, genuinely surprised despite his anguish. "Of course we came," James replied without a moment's hesitation. "Ryder is important to us. We love him." Dr. Sullivan surveyed the four adults, united in their genuine concern around the bedside of a child clinging to life. "Are you absolutely certain about proceeding with this experimental treatment? The risks are significant and very real." "Do everything," all four stated simultaneously, in unison. And in that moment, observing four adults who had learned to prioritize their love for a child above their own individual needs and differences, Dr. Sullivan knew Ryder had the best possible chance of survival, an entire family fiercely advocating for him. 6 months and 2 weeks later, the same family court reconvened, but the atmosphere had undergone a profound transformation. Where before there had been acrimonious tension and bitter division, there now existed a palpable sense of an extended family unit that had learned to function through shared love. Lincoln and James Wellington sat side by side in the front row, calmly discussing the children's visitation schedules and summer vacation plans. Rebecca was just behind them, meticulously organizing medical documents and photographs of the children that showcased their remarkable progress in family therapy. Jordan occupied his customary position in the middle, but now more as an integral family member than an external mediator. "Your Honor," Judge Hayes stated, and this time a genuine smile graced his features. "In my 23 years presiding over the family court, I have never witnessed a transformation as profound and salutary as this," she declared. The social worker's comprehensive report lay open on her desk, its pages replete with affirmative notations and encouraging observations. "Both children are thriving remarkably within the established co-parenting framework," she read aloud. "Ryder has responded exceptionally well to the experimental genetic treatment, demonstrating significant neurological amelioration. Mason has forged healthy and robust emotional bonds with Mr. Ford, while assiduously maintaining his established relationship with the Wellington family." She turned a page, a smile gracing her lips. "Crucially, both families have consistently evinced the capacity to prioritize the children's emotional and physical well-being over their own personal exigencies, aspirations, or challenges." "What, then, is your official final ruling, Your Honor?" Thomas Bradford inquired, even though the verdict was already implicitly clear from the judge's inflection. Judge Hayes rose with measured solemnity. "By means of this judicial decree, I hereby establish permanent joint legal custody between Lincoln James Ford and James Robert Wellington, vesting them with shared parental responsibilities for both children, Ryder Ford and Mason Wellington." A spontaneous ovation resonated throughout the chamber. "Both boys will officially be afforded 2 homes and an extended family that cherishes them unconditionally," she continued. "This arrangement shall be subject to annual review to ensure the sustained welfare of the children." The children, now visibly healthier and more ebullient, rushed to embrace all adults present simultaneously, forming a joyful cluster of hugs that elicited smiles even from the assembled reporters. "Does this signify that I have 2 bona fide daddies?" Mason inquired with characteristic childlike guilelessness. "And I have an enormous family," Ryder appended, his neurological tremors now barely discernible. James Wellington, who had embarked on this arduous journey as an embittered man fiercely contending to retain his son, now embraced Lincoln with fraternal warmth. "I am profoundly grateful for the salvation of my biological son," he whispered, "and I thank you for permitting me to continue cherishing yours." The new Jordan Pediatric Neurology Clinic had been operational for precisely 4 months when it officially became the most advanced medical facility in the American Midwest. Designed expressly to treat children like Ryder, it boasted state-of-the-art equipment imported from Europe and a stringent policy of no child ever turned away for financial reasons. The 3-story building cost $42 million, but Jordan considered every cent an investment in personal redemption. He had been saved by an act of selfless courage and was now dedicating his fortune to saving other children. "How are you feeling physically today, boys?" Dr. Sullivan inquired during the weekly joint therapy session that had become a tradition. Ryder was seated at a special table, drawing with almost completely normal motor coordination. His hands no longer trembled. His movements were fluid and controlled. Mason was directly beside him, helping choose colors for a drawing of a large family with many smiling adults. "I feel really strong now," Ryder said with a genuine smile that brightened the entire room. "And I hardly tremble at all anymore. I can hold small things without dropping them. And I feel very happy to have a real brother," Mason added, passing a blue pencil to Ryder. "Even if we don't live in the same house every night." Lincoln and James watched through the observation room's glass window, quietly discussing school plans and summer activities. Over the past few months, they had developed a genuine friendship built upon a shared love for the children and mutual respect for their journeys as single fathers. "You literally saved my biological son's life," James said softly, watching Ryder laugh at something Mason had drawn. "If you hadn't shouted that warning to Jordan, none of this would have happened. Ryder would be dead, and I would never have known my own son. And you taught me that family can be stronger than biology," Lincoln responded honestly. "Mason might carry your DNA, but you raised him with pure love for 5 years. That means something profound." Rebecca joined them in the hallway, carrying fresh legal documents and a stack of photographs of the children. "The legal action against Chicago General has been officially settled," she announced with satisfaction. "They agreed to pay $15 million in compensation to each family, in addition to implementing new safety protocols." "Tainted money built on blood and suffering," Lincoln murmured, though without genuine bitterness. "I'd rather have my wife Sarah back." "I completely understand." Rebecca placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. But this money will ensure that Ryder and Mason have everything they need for the rest of their lives, and that other families never endure what we did." Jordan appeared in the hallway at that moment, limping slightly, an enduring reminder that the conspiracy against his life had been real. Private investigators had uncovered that a $50 million life insurance scheme would be activated by his accidental death. Lincoln had literally saved both his life and his fortune. "How are our favorite patients progressing?" he asked, watching the children through the glass. "Improving dramatically each week," Dr. Sullivan replied, joining the group. "Ryder might be completely cured within 6 to 8 months. And Mason? Well, Mason never had anything medically amiss, save for being separated from his biological family." "Not the wrong family," Lincoln gently corrected. "Just an extended family now. James and Rebecca are genuine parents to Mason as well." Dr. Sullivan smiled. "You do realize you're completely redefining the modern concept of family structure, right? I've already received calls from universities wishing to study your arrangement as a model for similar situations." "As long as it helps other families," and Jordan said, "I'm willing to share our experience." Through the glass, they watched Ryder teach Mason how to draw a car, their hands now steady and precise. Two boys who had been separated by medical negligence, now united by a love that transcended genetics. Easter Sunday at the Wellingtons had officially become the most significant tradition on the calendar of Chicago's most unconventional extended family. The renovated Victorian home was spacious enough to comfortably accommodate all the adults, 2 energetic children, and the occasional guests who joined the celebration. Lincoln arrived around 10 in the morning, carrying a bag of clothes for Ryder and a dessert he had learned to make by watching YouTube videos. His culinary habits had drastically improved since he became part of a family that genuinely cooked together. "Daddy Lincoln," Mason shouted, barreling through the front door and leaping into his arms. "Can you teach me that basketball trick you promised?" "And Daddy James said he's going to help me build a Lego castle after lunch," Ryder added, scampering in behind Mason with an energy that would have been unimaginable 6 months prior. Lincoln and James exchanged genuine smiles. 6 months ago, the idea of co-parenting had seemed not merely impossible, but emotionally unbearable. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Uncle Michael's here!" Both children chorused in unison as the familiar black Bentley swept into the circular driveway. Jordan emerged from the car carrying 2 elaborately wrapped gifts and wearing casual attire that likely cost more than Lincoln's entire previous monthly salary. "How are my absolute favorite nephew?" Jordan quipped, immediately assailed by enthusiastic double hugs. "Uncle Michael!" Ryder exclaimed. "Look how I can hold tiny things now." He demonstrated by picking up a coin and spinning it between his fingers with flawless precision. "That's incredible, kiddo," Jordan responded with genuine pride. "You are officially a medical marvel." Rebecca emerged from the kitchen at that moment, her floral apron dusted with flour and her hands grimy with cookie dough. "Lunch will be ready in precisely 1 hour," she announced cheerfully. "Lincoln, James, could you two set the formal dining table? We have 14 people today." 14, Lincoln asked, taken aback. "Who else is coming?" "Dr. Sullivan and her husband, Marcus Thompson and his family, and the investigators who located Jessica Martinez," Rebecca explained. "A small celebration of our expanded chosen family." "Yes, Chef," Lincoln and James responded simultaneously, eliciting laughter from everyone present. Dr. Sullivan arrived a few minutes later, carrying updated medical reports and a homemade German chocolate cake that was legendary among her patients. "I have exceptional medical news," she announced as soon as she entered. "Ryder's latest neurological scans show completely normal brain function across all tested areas." The room erupted in spontaneous celebration. Hugs, tears of pure joy, shouts of elation, and applause that lasted for several minutes. "Does this mean he is officially and completely cured?" Lincoln asked through tears of relief. "It means the gene therapy was a success beyond our most optimistic expectations," Dr. Sullivan confirmed. "Ryder now has the neurological function of a completely healthy child." "And what about Mason?" Rebecca inquired, ever concerned for both children equally. "Mason was never medically amiss," Dr. Sullivan smiled. "He merely needed to find his complete biological family to feel emotionally whole and secure." Later, after a 3-hour luncheon that included more laughter than Lincoln had experienced in his entire preceding life, the two families settled into the expansive living room. The children played quietly on the floor with Legos. Lincoln and James discussed detailed plans for their summer vacation, and Rebecca and Jordan devised strategies to expand the clinic's programs to serve more families in need. Marcus Thompson, who had embraced an uncle-like role, was teaching the children to play chess with a patience that astonished everyone. "You realize we are officially Chicago's most peculiar and magnificent family, right?" Lincoln said with a smile that utterly transfigured his countenance. "The finest madcap family there ever was," James responded, raising his wine glass in an informal toast. "To families we choose, not just those we are born into," Jordan added. "To second chances and medical miracles," Dr. Sullivan contributed. "And to parents who risk everything to save strangers," Rebecca concluded, looking directly at Lincoln. As the April sun streamed through the expansive windows, suffusing the room with golden hues, two children who had been separated by medical negligence now played together as genuine siblings, surrounded by more genuine love than most children experience in a lifetime. The Chicago criminal courthouse was overflowing for the culminating trial that had seized national attention. National network reporters filled 2 full rows, cameras were positioned at every permitted angle, and the general public had queued outside since 5 in the morning to secure seats. Jessica Elena Martinez, now age 43, had finally been located by Jordan's investigators, living under a completely false identity in a small town in Mexico. She had spent 5 years attempting to evade the consequences of her actions, but international investigations eventually caught up with her. She remained seated at the defense table, her head bowed, graying hair concealing a face that had aged 2 decades in 5 years of fleeing justice. Her hands visibly trembled when she occasionally lifted her head. Judge Margaret Thompson, renowned for her stringent sentences in cases involving minors, presided over the session with absolute authority. She had meticulously examined every document, every piece of evidence, and every testimony pertaining to the case. "Jessica Elena Martinez," she read the verdict, her voice resonating throughout the courtroom. "You have been found guilty by the jury of aggravated criminal negligence, resulting in severe emotional distress for multiple families and endangering the lives of newborn infants." The woman in the defendant's seat remained utterly still, like a statue sculpted from guilt and remorse. "In addition to the Ford and Wellington families present today," the judge continued unflinchingly, Investigations have revealed that you were directly responsible for at least 6 other documented infant mix-ups during your 17-year career in neonatal nursing. Shocked gasps and murmurs of horror reverberated through the gallery. 2 of those prior mix-ups resulted in the deaths of infants who received incorrect medical treatments based on the mistaken identities you caused, she added, her voice rising in intensity. 4 other families lived for years without knowing their own biological children due to your repeated actions. Lincoln sat in the front row of the gallery with his entire extended family. Contrary to what he had anticipated, he felt neither satisfaction nor vengeance, only a profound sense of relief that other families would not endure the same devastating trauma. For your crimes against innocent families and vulnerable children, Judge Thompson announced, this court sentences you to 20 years of incarceration without the possibility of parole for 15 years. Jessica Martinez finally raised her head, tears streaming silently down her face, and looked directly at Lincoln across the crowded courtroom. She mouthed silently, "Forgive me." Lincoln pondered for a long moment, then nodded once. Not full forgiveness, but an acknowledgement of genuine remorse. Furthermore, the judge continued, the Chicago General Hospital will pay a total compensation of $80 million to the affected families and implement groundbreaking safety protocols developed in consultation with the Jordan Clinic. After the trial in the courthouse parking lot, surrounded by reporters and cameras, Jordan made an announcement he had been planning for months. With a significant portion of the legal compensation funds, he declared, I am officially establishing the Ryder Mason Foundation for Pediatric Hospital Safety and Medical Negligence Prevention. Why that specific name? A reporter asked. Jordan looked at Lincoln, who was holding both children, one cradled in each arm. Because 2 extraordinary children transformed a medical tragedy into a triumph of familial love, he responded. And because I learned that true family isn't about shared bloodlines, it's about choosing to love unconditionally. What will be the foundation's core mission? Another reporter inquired. To ensure that no family ever endures what these families did, Lincoln replied, taking the microphone. And to prove that sometimes the worst things that happen can become the very best things in our lives if we allow love to triumph over fear. The Ryder Mason Foundation's inaugural anniversary was celebrated in the expansive garden of the clinic's new headquarters on a perfect October Saturday. Over 300 families attended the event, many bringing children who had received free medical treatment through Jordan's pioneering programs. Ryder, now 7 years old and completely robust, stood on the small makeshift stage beside Mason, both sporting t-shirts that read, Chosen Family is Real Family. My name is Ryder Ford Wellington, he declared into the microphone in a clear, strong voice, without any trace of the neurological issues that had nearly claimed his life. And this is my brother, Mason Wellington Ford. Warm applause reverberated through the garden, filled with smiling families. 2 years ago, Ryder continued with the impressive articulation of a child who had survived the impossible. Our parents discovered that we had been switched at birth in the hospital. Everyone thought that would be terrible. But do you know what we found out? Mason confidently took the microphone. Real family isn't about who shares your DNA. It's about who chooses to love you every day, even when things get tough. In the audience, Lincoln wiped away tears of pride as he filmed with his new iPhone. James stood directly beside him, also recording, both men beaming with paternal pride. Rebecca was distributing slices of homemade cake to any child who wanted one. Jordan was animatedly discussing with doctors from other states how to expand the program nationwide. Dr. Sullivan approached the stage, carrying a wireless microphone. And what is the most crucial lesson you want other families to glean from your story? She asked the children. The 2 boys looked at each other and shared a complicit smile that only true brothers understand. Sometimes really bad things happen in life, Ryder said thoughtfully. But if you have people who truly love you around you, Mason continued the thought, you can turn anything bad into something good and beautiful. They finished together, hugging each other. The October sun was beginning to set over the Chicago skyline, painting the clinic's garden in golden and orange hues. An impossible family, forged by a catastrophic medical error and strengthened by love that transcended biology, celebrated not just survival, but complete triumph over circumstances that could have destroyed lives. Lincoln looked across the garden at Jordan, the man whose life he had saved with a desperate cry 2 years ago. Jordan returned his gaze and nodded, a genuine, warm smile completely transforming his face. Neither man knew on that cold day in the hotel that a moment of moral courage would change so many lives forever, that a hardworking black janitor and a multi-millionaire former basketball star would become family through impossible circumstances, that two children swapped by medical negligence would find not only the love they deserved, but double the love any child should expect to receive. Marcus Thompson watched from a nearby table, still maintaining his characteristic security posture, but smiling openly. Something his colleagues swore they had never seen before. This family entered their lives. Dr. Sullivan was documenting everything for a medical study she was writing about how love and family stability can literally heal neurological conditions that traditional medicine considered incurable. As the garden lights began to flicker and families gradually prepared to go home, Lincoln held Ryder and Mason's hands simultaneously. "You know Daddy Lincoln loves you more than anything in the world, right?" he whispered. "And Daddy James too," Ryder replied. "And Mommy Rebecca, and Uncle Michael, and Dr. Sullivan, and Uncle Marcus. We're the luckiest family there is," Mason concluded with the simple wisdom of a child who had found his place in the world. But perhaps the deeper truth is this: life's best happy endings are not the ones we carefully plan or that happen easily. It is these very things that grow, sometimes painfully, from our willingness to fight for those we love, even and especially when we don't know how the story will end. Sometimes a desperate plea to save a stranger can preserve far more than a single life. It can save two families, heal a child, and prove that love is stronger than genetics, more potent than wealth, and more enduring than any tragedy life can inflict. And as the lights of Chicago twinkled in the distance, a family that, by all accounts, shouldn't have existed, yet had been forged by pure love, walked towards home. Not a single dwelling, but an array of homes, for a true family is expansive enough to embrace any heart willing to love. If this story resonated deeply with you, subscribe to our channel now and activate notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring narratives. Because sometimes the most improbable tales are precisely the ones we need to hear, to remind us that miracles unfold when ordinary individuals make extraordinary choices fueled by love.